So I don't even need this.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome. I'm introducing Chef Fran Costigan. She's going to be doing a little talk and a little demo on her book, Vegan Chocolate. So sit back, relax. Don't spoil your lunch, but have a piece of cake. If you've already had lunch, I hope you enjoy. But here she is.
Thank you very much. I'm really so excited to be here. It's still winter in New York, so that's one reason, but it's a pleasure to come and meet you. And I do desserts. I've been doing this. I changed my diet 22 years ago. I was working as a traditional pastry chef, and I loved what I was doing. I loved the work, but my allergies and stomach I couldn't take it anymore, so I left. I went into rock and roll management. That's a whole other story. And I changed my diet without thinking vegan. I just said, I read a book called Food and Healing by Anne-Marie Colbin. So I'll give up dairy, but I actually gave up all animal foods. And I'm not the food police. I never say to people, how can you eat that? And this is the right way for everyone, because it isn't. We're a bio-individual. But for me, and I do things either black or white, that's the way I tend to be, it was a miracle. My allergies went away, except for yesterday, with all those purpley trees seem to be making my eyes run. But no stomach aches, great allergy. I don't have to think about my weight, ever, pretty much ever. But I didn't want to do desserts anymore because I really liked eating whole foods. So I'm not a junk food vegan. You know what I mean about that? I eat plants. I eat real food. And then, because it was the very beginning, I had just started eating this way, and I was so excited about the way I felt. I did get a little bit obnoxious, a little bit food policey, and my son, who was about 12 at the time, said, "You're not putting a candle in a sweet potato and telling me that's my birthday cake. Get back to making cakes." So I went into the marketplace 22 years ago. It's not what it is today at all. So everything tasted dry or gummy to me. And the recipe books, I had gone through culinary school, didn't make any sense. Use a cup of barley malt or a cup of sugar or whatever, didn't make sense. Nothing tasted good. And the biggest insult was someone handed me a cake, not as pretty as this, but it was brown. And it didn't taste like chocolate. They were like, "Oh, here, you can have chocolate cake." But it was carob. So they're both brown. That's about it. I said, well, that's it. Michael's not having a baked sweet potato. I don't want carob cakes. There's nothing wrong with carob, but it's not chocolate. I went in and I went into the test kitchen. I said, if I can get a cake that was as good as, if not better than, a good version of a conventional dessert, then I'd be good. And I say that because not every conventional dessert you eat is good, right? But there were a lot of bad vegan cakes there. Today, I'm happy to say, so this was a tweaked version of my original cake, the chocolate cake to live for, which one of my testers, non-vegan, went, "Oh my God, this is a cake worth living for." And it's stuck in a couple of different incarnations. Anybody here familiar with Rip Esselstyn or the Engine 2 diet? Dr. Esselstyn is Bill Clinton's doctor and reversed his heart disease. So his son, Rip, has the Engine 2 diet. That was his wedding cake. So I've been making it, and today what I've learned, I didn't know any vegans then, so I didn't really know I was vegan. I guess maybe I was macrobiotic, but if you're allergic to dairy, eggs, don't want to use white sugar, then for me, this isn't about what's not in the food. It's that everybody can be served. So generally speaking, I want to tell you that Kathleen made the cakes, and this really gorgeous. I asked her, how'd you get the glaze so perfect? Because mine isn't usually. I have to do this Picasso effect, which I'm going to do to show you. The glaze was made with almond milk, and there's soy milk in the cake. Now, when I'm doing something for a group and I can't poll people about allergies, I just assume allergies in today's world. So I just think there are going to be people who avoid soy, and there are going to be people who avoid nuts. And I have found So Delicious brand coconut milk beverage, which is different from canned coconut milk, but it's really just a plant milk like almond milk, soy milk, and so on. Works great. So you can make the same glaze using coconut milk beverage. In my book, I have a recipe for making a ganache with canned coconut milk and so on. So some of you probably know things like this, but I'm used to teaching. I teach in New York City. I kind of teach everywhere at this point. I've seen vegan or dairy-free really explode. And so I'm going to just say things from the beginning that you may already know. Ganache is an emulsion, typically, of heavy cream and chocolate in varying percentages, depending on will it be a glaze for a cake, will it be the center for a truffle, and I'm going to show you some. I like to toast a really delicious, crispy crostini. You know, make a crostini. I toast a baguette, spread it with some olive oil, and then smear it with some thickened ganache and finish it with olive oil and salt, and you have ganache. It's, you know, chocolate milk over ice cream. To me, it's just indispensable, and you can keep it in your refrigerator for at least a week and in your freezer. When it comes out, when you've made it ahead, so when I often make this ahead, and it will look like this, it will look like this, which isn't so attractive, but it will look like this, or this is better, like this. And then this is the way it was when I got here this morning, and all I did was make a water bath. I don't use a double boiler. I don't bother with that. Just a saucepan with a little bit of water in it. You don't want the bowl to touch, and you don't want steam, and you don't want just a little bit of steam or water to touch chocolate. When it does, anybody have this happen? I see heads nodding. It seizes. It gets gray. It gets hard like pebbles, and it can be fixed, maybe. So you don't want to go there. So just with some patience, very slowly, you do this. So it can be made ahead. What you need is a measured amount of chocolate chopped very finely in a heat-proof bowl. So the basic recipe for enough glaze to do a 9-inch cake with 2 coatings of glaze is 8 ounces of chocolate. The right chocolate to use is the one that tastes good to you. And I know from doing chocolate tastings with a lot of food bloggers and civilians and so on, we all have individual taste buds. So over here, this person, you know, these 2 people, it's called the food duo in New York, said, that chocolate is so sour and tannic, and other people liked it, and so on. So it's up to you. You have to do a little homework. If you want to work with chocolate, find the one that tastes good to you. But what isn't up to you, if you want the result to be positive, successful, is that you have to stay within the percentage of chocolate that's listed in the recipe. So I typically say 70 to 72% chocolate is my kind of, let's say, go-to chocolate. That works for most everything. This glaze was made with a 70% chow, right? Yeah. So it's a little bit, it might be a little bit softer. So what happened here was, I don't think the sugar ever got in here. You bring whatever plant milk you're using, which would be almond or coconut milk beverage are my favorite, or if the recipe calls for canned coconut milk, to a boil. It would be good to give it a little stir, so I will. So I knew that I would have all the equipment I needed here because all the chefs were great, but I travel teach a lot, so I bring things like my little baby measuring cup and my little tiny whisk. So you pour, what's important is the milk, the sugar, and the pinch of salt has come to a boil. You pour it, you saw that I poured it over the chocolate all at once. If you just drizzle it in, you're in trouble. So you have to pour it in all at once. What I normally do, and I didn't do, is not very scientific, but I take a spoon and I put some of the milk. I bring the milk to a boil. A lot of other pastry chefs, particularly vegan, will tell you don't bring the plant milk to a boil, but I think it gives a better result. And then, without picking it up, because I have chocolate all over me all the time anyway, is just swirl it, and now we're going to pretend that this is covered for about 4 minutes. And I have found, people say, oh, your recipes are so long. That means they're hard. They're not, they are long. But I kind of say, go in the kitchen, turn on the lights, set the rack in the right place, turn on, oven thermometer. A lot of detail. The batter will be thin. Don't worry about it. Cover the chocolate. So that's why they're long. You give it a swirl. I didn't trickle it in, and I have found that by letting the chocolate melt into the hot liquid for about 4 minutes really makes a difference in the mouthfeel. You want something that's silky. I would rather have it not melt 100% than be too hot, and I'll tell you what happens if it's too hot. If it doesn't melt, part of my mise en place, and that just means getting everything together that you need. If nuts need to be roasted and cooled, it's done. Because you can't always grind hot nuts. It's great for nut butter, but not for nut flour and things like that. Get them together. But so I have a saucepan. You see how little water is in here? So it's always on the back of the stove somewhere. And if it didn't melt all together, just put it over here. Count to, I usually say sing happy birthday, and you're done. And now I'm going to add a pinch of salt. That's another thing I hear from people. Seem to be afraid to eat nowadays. Like, I heard that was really bad for you. I heard this was good for you. This is bad. That's good. I don't know. I think if we eat clean food that works for what we like, if something is said to be a superfood or really fabulous and you really don't like it, your body is probably saying it's not for you. I haven't met anyone who doesn't like chocolate yet, though. And I say chocolate is a bean, and I eat beans, but it's not a salad. So get your healthy from eating other things and then save room for this. So I am stirring from the center out, whisking. Why from the center out? I can only say that when I was in culinary school, my chef said, stir ganache from the center out. Once it's smooth, and you can see that it is. Can you see that it is? You really have to stop. Two things can happen, a few things can happen. If the plant milk or any liquid, because I have anybody here like tahini? I have an orange juice tahini truffle in this book that is so good. It's just delicious. So there's a case where it's not a plant milk, it's a different liquid. But if the liquid is too hot, what would have happened is I'd be stirring, and I have this really lovely, it's glossy, it's lovely, and all of a sudden, just like an oil slick on the top, and it starts dancing around. And what that is was that the liquid was so hot, it was too hot for the chocolate, so the cocoa butter separated. Now, cocoa butter isn't dairy, it's the fat in chocolate, it's the white fat. And the other thing that might happen is if I just keep whisking really kind of vigorously, then it can get gritty. So that's it. I mean, I'm telling you that this is a very easy recipe. And it's very variable depending on the kind of chocolate that you use, the proportions. You can make truffles with this. You can do tons of stuff. I added the salt, didn't I? Because I kind of feel it on my fingers. Thank you. I always need people in the front to help me out when I'm talking. I don't know if you remember. The next thing that I do is I say to my students when they leave, they're like, oh, I don't know. We learned a lot of recipes in Vegan Baking Boot Camp, but the one thing I remember is, did you test? Did you test? And they say, well, it tasted good. Well, that's a taste test. But a test is, that looks okay, but is it okay? I don't know. And I don't want to wait until it's time to glaze the cake. Company's coming. Or I'm short on time, I have to run out for something. I don't want to wait until the last minute to find out that this ganache is too thick or too thin. If it's too thick, I'll just whisk in a little at a time, stir in a little bit more of the liquid. If it's too thin, I'll melt some chocolate and whisk it in. So all you need to do, and if sometimes I do it in a little pinch cup. Sometimes, literally, I'll take the whisk and go like this on a plate. 5 minutes in a cold, refrigerator, and you go like this. What'll happen in a few minutes, and I'll show you, is it will look like it's set, but you need to taste it, because is it creamy? Is it too firm? A lot depends on what you want. Now, truthfully, I used a little bit less milk in here this time because I wanted it to set up more quickly. So we'll see what happens. This isn't going to set this way. Anybody have any questions? Only time I can't answer questions is when I'm measuring. It's impossible for me. But other than that, any questions about this? Anybody here not like what's called dark chocolate? So I would say that the most surprising fact that I learned when I was researching vegan chocolate, which wasn't my choice for a title, by the way, but it just showed me how the world's gone round. You know, I used to have to defend, no, try it, it's okay. Don't worry, just because it's vegan. But now they wanted vegan in the title. But I also, the tagline says dairy-free, because there are people who walk by vegan but really need to be dairy-free, which is almost everyone's lactose intolerant, almost every adult, really, if you do a little research. So what I learned was, in the United States, up to 12% milk or milk solids is allowable in chocolate that is non-milk chocolate, that's labeled dark chocolate. And you see it more in the less expensive brands, not so much in the premium brands. It's definitely disclosed. It will say, you know, cacao mass or unsweetened chocolate. Those are interchangeable. If you're using organic sugar, you know, it'll say evaporated cane juice or organic sugar or whatever. Maybe some lecithin and vanilla, and then milk, the words for milk. And I was so curious about that because I used to say, you know, sort of not exactly roll my eyes, but when someone asked me, how do you know if the chocolate's vegan? I would think, well, if it's not milk chocolate, I suppose it's vegan, unless you're that really ethical vegan that will only use vegan sugar. Do you know what vegan sugar is? So it's not filtered through bone char. And vegans used to like beet sugar for that reason, years before we had all these choices, because that is never filtered through bone char. But because beets are almost 100% genetically modified crop today, we don't like beet sugar anymore. So it's interesting. I was doing a chocolate dessert demo in Paris. I got invited to Paris Vegan Days, and I was thinking, well, I'm not going to turn Paris down, that's for sure, but that's an oxymoron if I ever heard one. And 10,000 people came from all over, really. There's a London Veg Fest now, and all this kind of stuff. So I tell the same story about the beets and GMO, and the translator pokes me and she says, not here, not in Europe. We don't do GMO. We don't buy your foods and so on. So there you go. So I think, so I haven't, the other ingredients that belong in here is a little bit of oil. It's optional. It's about 2 teaspoons per recipe, but I feel that you get the nicest feel, the silkiest texture, and so on. So we'll put that aside, and I'm going to use Kathleen's glaze for this cake. And I'm going to put gloves on because I will get messy. And then this is going to get popped in the fridge. What I like to do is glaze it once, let it set a little bit, just until it's not wet anymore, and then glaze it a second time. And that is the right amount of chocolate to use. And you don't have to know. I'm not very good at cake decorating, which is why I do what I'm going to show you, my Picasso effect. I tasted this. It's delicious. And it was as solid as what I showed you earlier when we got here. So sometimes I just pour it right out of here, but that would be exceedingly messy, and I'm trying not to be. So this, you know, you could say that this is perhaps a little bit thinner than I might want it to be. And you just go like this. Sometimes I do the cakes. So you definitely want to do it over parchment paper. And then if you get the paper cold, you know, let it set up in the fridge again, you can reclaim this chocolate. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do the second glazing. See why I don't wear a white chef coat when I'm doing chocolate? For obvious reasons. Now, the recipe is for a single layer cake, but you just double the recipe, and you have a double layer cake. So, okay. Well, I'm going to put it right on here because we were doing that earlier. So this can go in the fridge if you wouldn't mind. I'm going to get rid of these. And now I want to make, so we'll let this set up. So, yeah, so what you remember is, okay, it's too firm. I made it ahead. I'm going to put it over a water bath and let it get pourable. But wait until it's perhaps more like this. And this will also be creamy, like a buttercream that isn't a buttercream. So I never used to use the word high-speed blender in any of my talks because I kind of didn't have the heart to tell people that they needed something so expensive, and then I got one. And it really is a game changer. If you like being in the kitchen, I use my high-speed blender many times a day. What I have here is 5 ounces of raw whole cashews, unsalted, they're raw, that have been soaked. So you soak them for 4 hours to overnight, even if you're using a high-speed blender. They can go overnight, they could probably go 2 days, but after that, nothing happens, especially if you change the water. I think you lose some of the flavor. If you want to make a nut cream, or this can be a base for an ice cream or many things, you're going to serve it so you can taste it, and you didn't remember to soak the nuts, hot soak them. Bring some water to a boil, put them in the boiling water for just a few minutes, drain them, and they're ready to go. Now cashew cream has become this wow ingredient in vegan non-dairy desserts because it can be used to do so many things. So some of the savory chefs say, but if you hot soak them, they'll be a little sweet. I don't care. I'm doing sweet. So what I have in here, I'm just going to get this started. And then you get one. What goes in here is, could look at the recipe, couldn't I? But I know it by heart. I mean, that's fighting words. That's dangerous. Oh, I know it by heart. No, I really do know it. So it's, this one I do. Cake, I'm going to show you how I measure. So it's 1 cup of canned full-fat coconut milk, any brand that you like. I never buy light coconut milk in a can. I spend a lot of money on good ingredients because you taste, what you put in, you're going to get out. All you're going to taste is the chocolate in the glaze. You need to use a chocolate that tastes good. But I'm not paying for water. So if I want light coconut milk, I mix it with water. So here, this is very unusual to have the coconut milk be so solid all the way through. Have any of you made the coconut whipped cream where you put the can of coconut milk in the fridge and then it's supposed to separate? Does yours always separate? No, right? Because they're putting more and more guar gum in the coconut milk. So people like coconut whipped cream, which is when you take the fat off here and, mix it in a stand mixer. But I always chill the can for at least 24 hours, usually more, and I always have an extra can because you just never know. There are some brands that seem to be better than others. That was a pinch of salt, and now this is probably this and the ganache are pretty much the only recipes I have committed to memory. My daughter-in-law wants me to. Yeah, but you can, if you have it there, I wouldn't mind. 6 tablespoons of sugar. So I am very bad at math. My daughter's a statistician, but I can't do math. But I had to learn some kitchen math, so I know 1/4 cup is 4 tablespoons. And a 1/3 cup is 5 tablespoons and a teaspoon. So when I'm baking, when I'm doing desserts, I really am precise. And I'm going to show you the way that I measure for cakes. Because the difference between this is pretty good and great can be a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons, or the oven temperature being wrong, and so on. And it's a tablespoon of oil. So my oil of choice, in my earlier book, I used canola oil, because I don't use butter, and I don't use margarine because I consider that an inferior product. I would use butter before I'd use margarine. Now, I know a lot of people like the Earth Balance margarines, but I also don't use palm oil because of the orangutans. But I will tell you this. Miyoko Shinner, who's a friend and colleague of mine, is coming out. Her new book is launching in June, and it's called Vegan Pantry. And I stayed with her. I was at San Bruno, Google, and I stayed with Miyoko, who's nearby, and I tasted her butter. She also has vegan cheeses that are unbelievable. So, and you can make them. If you have a blender, you make butter. So pretty much that's it except for the vanilla, right? Right. So before I turn this on, because I can't talk over it, what you're going to have is this. We made this earlier. The full recipe calls for grinding the nuts and the coconut milk and the pinch of salt and the vanilla and so, not the vanilla, until this is very warm. And then adding a little bit of agar powder. Agar is vegetable jello, agar. The powder until it actually boils, and a little bit of guar gum. And then it becomes quite thick so that you could use, this becomes a pastry cream if you want to do a fruit tart, but you don't want to use a dairy cream, creme anglaise or something like that. It's really gorgeous that way. But as a sauce, you just can leave the guar and the agar out. So this takes pretty much no time, assuming I can get this. This is a different kind of a Vitamix from what I'm used to. Yeah, I've learned my lesson about putting this in with the, Okay, and it could be because I didn't really measure, which I never don't measure. I just feel really relaxed today. I think I don't want to go home. I like it here. All right, like this. I've learned two things about using the high-speed blenders, and one is make sure that the top is on. Here, must go this way. Yeah, I've seen most of them, but not this particular kind. And then if I need to thin it, I'll know by tasting, and so on. And then vanilla or vanilla bean. I put some vanilla bean in because I have all these vanilla beans. And one of the really nice things about vegan desserts too is that you can taste away, and you should taste, because you don't have to worry about salmonella. There's no egg situation here, right? So you can just taste. This isn't quite as smooth as I'd like it, so I'm going to put a little bit of water in and a little bit of vanilla, and we're good to go. Then I want to show you how I measure, and then you want cake? We could start passing the cakes around. I don't usually do that till I'm finished talking because I lose everybody, but I really am eager for you to taste that cake. Taste the cake, because that's where the proof is. And is there anybody here who can't have cashews? Right, okay. So we'll get the cake served. Aha. It's counterintuitive. The button goes down, not up. There you go. All right, that looks much better. You see this? So sometimes people say, how do you know when it's done? When it's done. Sometimes baking, the cake should have risen, come away from the sides, pulled away from the sides, and a wooden skewer inserted in the center and pulled out. Should be almost dry. If that's your only test, the cake can be overdone. So you start using all of your senses. I want to show you what I do when the glaze is not so perfect as Kathleen got the glaze, which is pretty much all the time for me. For some reason, I haven't mastered glaze, but I do this. And then I'm going to hit it with a little gold luster dust, and it looks like $1 million, and your friends really think that you worked extra long on it. Where can you buy that? What's that, the gold luster dust? Any cake shop. Any cake shop. There you go. So I do this pretty often, and let's just see. We've got so much ganache that we can have a little ganache on the side so you can taste it also. Then, and here's the gold luster dust. Here we go. Does anybody have any questions? No? That's a great question because it depends. When I'm doing just 8 ounces of chocolate or even 16 or just in the mood to it's kind of like my relaxation, then on a very dry cutting board, always with chocolate, dry, dry, dry. And I have I like a flex board for chucking chocolate because it can go like that. And I'm either a heavy knife like this, but from the corner of the bar and just keep going. I happen to I have a serrated knife that isn't flexible that I like. If you're doing quantity, like what I'll do is I'll chop 10 pounds of chocolate at one time and weigh it. I really recommend those little electronic scales that cost pretty much nothing, but they're really amazing for weighing things. Then I will chunk the chocolate and put it in a dry food processor, not too much at a time, and run it until it's finely chopped. Finely chopping your chocolate really makes a difference, like letting it relax, melt slowly into the milk as well, really makes a difference. If you're tempering chocolate, anybody here interested in tempering chocolate? It's that shiny thing. Well, nobody that I know, not one single pastry chef I know, pretty much, I shouldn't say that, never say never. People aren't really tempering the old way, which meant bringing it up to temperature and then smearing it on a marble board and so on. We seed temper, so if you guys can do the math for me. If you have you want to melt 70% of the chocolate that you're melting, and then hold out 25% in a chunk or in chunks, those are the seeds, and then bring it in and let it stir again, and that will take care of keeping the chocolate shiny, for example. But another workaround is to just keep things that are glazed with that kind of chocolate in the freezer, really tightly covered, and that works. So this, for example, is the cake that you're tasting, but sort of torted up. So it's a double layer cake. It's a soccer tort with apricot in the center, and this cream that you're having, but thicker. By the way, I love being in this Lebowski room, because when I came in, I'm like, what? There are vegan white Russians in this book. And yeah, in the day, people used to say, I would hear them behind me saying, we're not sure about Costigan. We don't really think she's vegan. She drinks wine. She wears lipstick. Nobody really does things like that anymore. But my son-in-law, who is that film was like his film of all time, I think, heard me talking about it, and he said, oh my God, how do you know about that? And I'm like, really? Give me a break. You can make vegan ice creams using cashew cream base, avocado base, or just a plant milk base in the book. And I don't know, do you know the black bottom the ice cream shell that gets hard? So there's a two ingredient recipe in here for that ice cream shell. So I have ice creams, I have creme brulee, I have pies. I have, people say, how do you get your ideas? It's the things that I like eating, and that where I won't have to use junky stuff, because I won't use junk. This is an opera cake with a similar glaze, but made with a little bit of agar to give it body. And once you learn a couple of the techniques, so essentially that's what I did today, was this. But I just want to show you the truffle I like to enrobe truffles, just roll them. This is the sesame truffle for the person who likes tahini. I just learned that sesames are really high up on the allergy alert scale. And I wonder about all these allergies now. I certainly don't make fun of it because I know that it's true. But it wasn't true back in the day, and I'm clear that we just broke the food system. We're just doing things to food that we shouldn't. These are truffles made where exactly what I did here, but I infused the liquid with spices and then strained it. So you can do that. Curry, or I really love ginger. My new favorite thing is turmeric. And has that hit here? Turmeric, fresh turmeric root. So everything that I touch, everything in my kitchen is now orange. because I haven't figured out how to get it out. So this would be, these are cashew cream truffles, but any truffle can be enrobed. And this chocolate was seed tempered. But when I don't have time, I put this, I said in the book, I said, well, you know, sometimes they crack or I don't really even feel like seed tempering. I do the hybrid method. So I dip the truffles in chocolate, let them get set up, and then roll them a little bit in a dusting of cocoa powder, and then you're good to go. Nobody knows that maybe it's not perfect. The last thing I want to show you, and then I want to invite everybody up to get some cake. We've got berries there and the cream, and I'm going to cut this, is how I measure. So if you go to my YouTube channel, I have a cookbook trailer in English and in German now. The person who dubbed my voice in German sounds very stern, and one of my German-sounding friends said, I don't think that's going to sell any books, but anyway, that's what happened. I choose my battles. I'm not fighting over it. So, who bakes here? Anybody bake? Yay, great. So some recipes say spoon the flour into the cup, and my recipes say quite the opposite. Did you just see me whisk? So I aerate all of my dry ingredients, flour, sugar, cocoa powder. My book is in metric as well as weights, and I know metric is, as well as cups. I know metric is supposed to be exact, but we found, I had a bunch of interns with scales, and we found it wasn't. You know, how fine is the sugar? And how long has the flour been sitting? So I whisk everything, and then I do what I call whisk, dip, and sweep. So I whisk, overfill, and with a flat edge, just go like this. And then this goes, I don't have a sifter, but I absolutely recommend sifting as part of the process. So we're going to pretend that this is all-purpose flour. Whole wheat pastry flour. Whole wheat pastry flour is different from whole wheat flour. It's softer. Cocoa powder, and you need to know, is the cocoa powder alkalized or Dutch process or natural? The recipe should tell you. They don't always. One way to find out is if the leavening is just baking soda, you can be pretty sure that it's just baking, then it's natural cocoa powder. And if it's baking soda or baking powder, then it's Dutch process or alkalized. And then so everything's in here now, right? All of the dry ingredients. And I whisk it, strain it, I call it sifting, into the bowl. If you don't have whole wheat pastry flour, you can just add up the amount of flour and use all AP. And then the last step with all these ingredients is to whisk, and then all the liquid ingredients in another bowl. And I just don't combine them until I know that the oven rack is in the right place, which for a standard oven would be the center, that the cake pan is greased, oiled, and a piece of parchment on the bottom, and don't flip the parchment over, and don't use flour. You know, unless the recipe writer is telling you to do it, but not with my recipes. I find it doesn't work. And then you're good to go. And then put it in the oven. So if you don't have time, you know, it's like the phone rang or something, just don't combine your batter. I do recommend everybody has an oven thermometer in their oven because they vary like crazy, right? I had a brand new oven, and I set it to 350, and I looked at it, and it was 425, so my cake would have been not very good. Not very good at all. And here you go. You did a gorgeous job. Now, I would never serve a piece of cake this big, but I'm just feeling like it now. Yeah. And then, so nobody asked me about replacing eggs. Are you all just hip to that? So I have never used commercial egg replacer. What I think is that in the day, because I started 22 years ago, I don't know if there was any, and I can always taste it. And all it is a mixture of starches. So what function of the egg are you replacing? Liquid? Very easy, right? Binding, very easy. Flavor, no problem. And so what I figure is there were a lot of accidentally vegan recipes that happened during the war. Everybody's grandma had the cake with baking powder, baking soda, and vinegar. And that's what leavens your cake, baking powder, baking soda, and vinegar. So my recipes say organic sugar, organic flour, aluminum-free baking soda. You don't have to use organic. You don't have to use aluminum-free baking powder as long as your baking powder is fresh. I just figure, for me personally, once I've learned things, I can't get them out of my head. So that's where I'm going. But you do have to measure right. I did an event at a spa hotel last week, and the pastry chef wrote, "Happy birthday" with the ganache, which is a bit thicker, on the plate, put it in the fridge. You can do things like that with a little squeeze bottle and so on, and it looks really beautiful. You can also, I like a lot of berries, because this is California. Boy, have you got fruit here. Oh, my goodness gracious. You know, at home, I have like 2 kinds of avocados. I went to the Hollywood Farmers Market, and we had an avocado tasting. I never saw such things. Here we go. Let's just really pile this up. And here, sometimes I will do a parfait. You know, if you have leftover cake, or just cut cake circles, put them into a glass. So you can serve this on the side, or you can just put it over some of the berries. I'm going to be around, so while you're tasting, if you have any questions, just ask me questions. So I want to thank you very, very much. I hope you like the cakes. I mean, that's the proof, really, isn't it? No questions? All right. Well, if you think of something, here I am. Thank you. Yum.